So it is live at 5, August 10th. We're happy. We're gonna start off with the happy hour, the ETF Think Tank happy hour, as we land all our guests. We have a special guest, Jay Coulter, here today, and he's gonna be talking about best practices for high-performing financial advisors. I'm Dan Weisskopf, lead ETF strategist for the ETF Think Tank, and also the ETF professor and co-portfolio manager of Block. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And with that, I'm going to hand off the mic to Cynthia.
Hey, everybody. Cynthia Murphy, head of research for the ETF Think Tank. Thanks for joining us. I have a great show today, a great guest. And, what's not to like about best performing, high performing, all the good words that we like to hear. So we're going to learn some stuff today with Jay. Mike, you go next, and then we'll have Jay introduce himself.
Okay. Mike Venuto here, co-founder of Title, the think tank, and all this fun stuff. Excited to have Jay back. We do some other things with Jay. He helps us out with some videos and some things we do for Block. So it's great to have him here. And he's also been a good friend of the firm for a very, very long time. I kind of love that we're pivoting towards, ideas for advisors. It's not something we get to cover a lot. Last week we were deep in the weeds on how to value Bitcoin, and I still don't know if we got that number. So I'm still waiting. Let's see. We do have a word today. I think it's social. Is that what we decided on?
Social media.
Social media.
We're drinking twice.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, Jay, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. And guys, thanks for having me back on the show. Happy to come in here and talk about best practices of financial advisors. My name's Jay Coulter. I have two businesses that serve advisors. I have a coaching business where I work with RIAs and independent advisors, helping them streamline their practice. And then we have a boutique media company where we help asset managers who market to financial advisors put together marketing programs in digital format, primarily video, to go after that space. And as part of that, we are the curators of Financial Advisor Television, which if you're a financial advisor, I am sure that we have spammed your social media feed at some point in the last 2 years.
Thank you for the spam. All right, who wants to go first?
I'll go first, and we're talking about social media, and I'll tell you all a funny story today. We're always trying to talk to financial advisors and help them out, and I use LinkedIn actively, and I reached out to Morgan Stanley advisor who I knew 20 years ago, and through messaging, I just randomly said hi. And, it's a little bit ad hoc. And guess what? We ended up having a 35-minute conversation as a result of it. And you just don't know when social media, is going to kick in, is my point. How does one measure success, Jay, as a financial advisor for social media?
Boy, there's a lot to unpack with that question. And it really just depends on the advisor and their approach to marketing and sales. And I'll give you some examples. A lot of times when advisors call me, they'll say, Jay, I would like to get better at marketing and have a social media platform like you have. And I'm fortunate that I have a pretty wide audience in marketing to financial advisors. But I'd say 90% of the time after the conversation, the advisor realizes that they don't need to spend that much time on social media. Because if you're marketing to dentists or you're marketing to closing attorneys, they're not on social media in the same way that financial advisors are consuming it. They're not on LinkedIn. So it really just depends on the type of business that they have. But to put some meat on an answer to that question, when it comes to video marketing, which is really our fastball in the media business, we look at impressions that a post gets, views that a post gets, and then call to action clicks inside of the video. And measuring those three metrics tend to help us drive activities after the fact, if that makes sense.
I actually, since we're just diving head on into this, before the show, we were talking about some of this stuff. And, here we always talk about how you have to be in social media. You have to be active out there. It's all part of this consistent branding effort, marketing effort, getting known, make sure people know your expertise, all that stuff. And then you make this shocking statement in our prep that you don't actually think advisors should be on social media, which, go ahead and take your sips. I'm drinking margarita tonight, so I'm all for the sips today. And I cannot wait to hear the argument of why an advisor should actually not be on social media. If you're not going to be on social media, how are you going to get your word out there? Is there another channel that is preferred?
All right. So this gets back to, it's different for every advisor. So there's plenty of opportunities for advisors who need to grow to leverage these social media platforms. I'm going to try and give a lot of examples today and give you folks that you can go follow who are world-class at this. So the first name that I recommend anybody follow is Samantha Russell. She's the chief evangelist over at FMG Suite. Her posts are incredibly articulate, up to date, and tell you what the best practices are on different social media platforms. So if you're going to be on there, follow her. One of her best ideas, though, that I try to articulate to advisors who think they want to leverage social is that for every post you have out there, you need to be commenting on about 8 to 10 different posts on that platform. You cannot just be screaming at the marketplace. You have to be engaging with people, and that takes a certain time commitment. So if that's going to be part of your strategy, you have to commit the time to engage with the community.
Well,
and then you got to deal with compliance, right? I think that's always the hardest part, right? You can get compliance to approve a thoughtful, timely, what you described, tweet. And then somebody engages with it. What, you're sending the foresight every time you respond? It's funny. The people who have the most to say are usually the ones with their hands most tied in this situation.
Yeah, that's right. And depending upon the platform where you're running your business, you might not be able to say anything. Like if you're at UBS or Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley. If you're an independent advisor, you're running your own compliance, you can go and pretty much say whatever you would like. Just be prepared for that audit. One way around some of this as well is to make sure that you have a content creation mechanism tool if you are going to be active on social. So a great advisor to follow in the marketplace is Roger Whitney. So he's about to pass his 500th episode of the Retirement Answer Man. About 6 months ago, I went and did a run through of all the retirement focused podcasts out there. And his, by far, there isn't even really a close second, is the best one in the marketplace. He's very passionate about it, and you have to be for 500 episodes. That gives him a tremendous amount of high quality content to get into the marketplace. So if that's the top bar in which you might want to aspire to be, there are companies out there that can help you launch a podcast so you have that social media content out there. And by the way, anybody I mentioned, I don't have a commercial relationship with anybody in this business. I would recommend, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, don't do it on your own. It's hard. I think everybody on this call does it to some degree. There's a company out there called Proudmouth, run by Matt Halloran and Kirk Lowe, and they can help you streamline that process. And they have done it for hundreds of financial advisors. And you produce a podcast twice a month as a financial advisor, it gives you a tremendous amount of content.
Cynthia, I kind of jumped in. Did you have a follow-up where you were going?
No, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, Jay. So the content is key. So for every advisor who wants to grow, content creation is kind of the gateway drug. But distributing that gateway drug is through social media. So if you're not going to jump on social media, are we talking like email newsletters? I mean, how are you going to get your message out there? I mean, there's so many and it's so noisy out there.
Yeah.
So what's the option?
So let's go the other way. So most of the advisors that I engage with in the consulting side, they're already doing $1 million in revenue. They have a book of business. They're established. And typically what we find is if you optimize your client base, you make sure it's segmented correctly, and I'll explain what that means in a second, and you just spend time with your biggest and best clients, you will get referrals and introductions. Research from Schwab tells us that advisors who are going after the high net worth community will receive 70 to 75% of all their new relationships over the next 12 months from referrals and introductions from their existing client base. So when $1 million producer calls me and says, Jay, I want a Twitter profile like yours or a YouTube channel, I'd say, great. Tell me about the last 3 times you spoke to your 7th largest client. And they can't. And so we start there to make sure that they're optimizing their existing client base. Here's how you do it in really simple terms if you're listening to this. Make a list of all of your clients and sort them by revenue over the previous 12 months. Identify the top 50% of your revenue and call those your A clients for this simple exercise. And then ask yourself, how much time are you spending socially and in business conversations with that top 50% of revenue? Most of the time it's not enough. Start spending your time there and you get more business. Every time.
So I've got a cheesy question to ask because, well, I'm the ETF professor, so sometimes I ask cheesy questions. What can I say? So I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out the issue between having a paper business card and a digital business card. And some of you probably know that I've got this on LinkedIn as a question. Which do you think, as a financial advisor, which is better? Because you use them differently, right? A digital is used differently than a paper card. You hand a paper card to somebody who is 23, they look at you and like, what am I going to do with it? You hand a paper card to somebody who's 70 years old, they say, thank you very much, and they put it away. You hand a digital card to a 70-year-old and they go, what are you, crazy? What do I do with this? Yeah.
So Sales Manager 101 before LinkedIn and social media was to make sure that you did not have a business card on you. So that when you're out in a social situation and somebody says, oh, do you have a business card, Mr. or Mrs. Financial Advisor? You say, you know what? I don't. Could I get one of yours and follow up with you? It gives you the opportunity to make sure you're connecting with them. It's no different here.
Yeah, I get it. That's
Jay,
good.
I
That's a
think
good one,
you're
Jay.
right. I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah. So you started to talk about segmenting, which I find really interesting because I've been dealing with some stuff with some financial advisors lately, and seeing a lack of homogeny in the book of business, meaning really young people and then people who are in their distribution phase. I'm not going to use age. I'm just going to call it distribution phase, right? They're not putting money in anymore. They're taking money out. And like, it seems like such a different cohort, but like, you know, if you're an advisor, you can't ignore the large money that is in the distribution phase, but you're also going to peter out if you can't attract that accumulation phase client, right? So I'm curious to tell me more about this segmentation concepts that you were describing.
Yeah. So when I started my consulting practice about 10 years ago, Michael, I wanted everybody to think I was smart. So I built this very complex spreadsheet to show segmentations and show how smart I was and what deep analysis I could do on their book of business. And from that complex tool, I went out and built a communication system where once you knew what your A client, your B client, your C client, your D client, even your E client were, you knew exactly when you were going to be communicating with them. I had it all wrapped up in an Excel spreadsheet so I could get it inside of Merrill Lynch and UBS, where they can't use some of the external resources that you have on the independent side. It was sexy. And every single one of them failed for 2 years. And failure looked like this. I delivered it back to them. They started using it. I would check in. They say, Jay, this is great. I check in again 90 days later and they'd say it broke. And it broke because it was too complex.
Yeah.
So what I teach today is the most watered down version that an 8th grader could put together. And that's empowered financial advisors to actually be able to use it. In fact, if you go to resilientadvisor.com, you can download this system and build it yourself. You don't even have to hire us. And so you take your client base, you figure out your top 50% in revenue, then you figure out your next 30% in revenue. So you've identified the top 80% in revenue in total. And what we're doing is reverse engineering the Pareto principle. Everybody else we call Z clients, not because they're not valuable clients, but those are the clients that are weighing down your practice, and you have to serve them appropriately. So whether it's just that one check-in meeting a year for the folks that are growing their business, you want to make sure they're not taking too much of your time. Now, what's really interesting after doing this for 10 years, that top 50% of revenue, that A segment, whether I run that on a $100 million book of business or a $600 million book of business, it's usually between 10 and 15 households, representing the top 50% of your revenue. So all most advisors have to do if they want to grow is replicate those folks that are in the top 50%, spend time with them and get the referrals and introductions.
Yeah, but like, I understand you're simplifying it, but it sounds like it's being simplified just down to AUM and expense ratio, right? Like, so like, and a lot of times that AUM and expense ratio are the other end of the Pareto spectrum, the most pain in the ass clients, right? I used to, when, you know, I'm not a financial advisor anymore, but I was once in a decades ago, right? I had to do all the cold calling and get all that shit done. You know, I just, I find it hard to make the only commodity the revenue because time seems so much more valuable. So I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yes. So we do account for that. So
Okay.
what you do after you build this process, it's in an Excel spreadsheet with simple drop-down boxes that label a client an A for the top 50%, a B for the next 30% in revenue, and Z for the rest. And then it's the advisor's job to go in there and figure out the lifetime value of those clients subjectively. If there are B's in there, that's a 40-year-old power couple, it's going to be a great long-term client. You might want to serve them at the same level as A's. There might be some A's in there that they don't want to hear from you but once a year. And so you then move them into a B or Z segment. But I can tell you subjectively, most compliance issues that advisors run across, they fall in that Z bucket. And so that's why identifying them and making sure that they're at the right firm, being served by you and served in the right manner is really important as it comes to allocating your time.
Gotcha. Okay. Dan, do you have your hand up for real, or I
For
didn't know if
real.
I was
No,
ignoring-
for
okay.
real. Totally. Yeah.
Fire away.
No, I'm faking it, by the way. No. So anyway, everybody talks about the $1 trillion shift of money from one demographic to another, right? And the problem most 60-year-old, I think in terms of age, sorry, maybe that's inappropriate, but the problem a lot of folks seem to have is how do they get to that younger generation? You know, some advisors hire the younger advisor to like talk to the younger folks. What do you see as being a way to capture that younger generation if you're old like me?
Yeah, the general demographics are a real challenge inside of these books of business. One thing that I have learned is that folks live a lot longer than you think. These clients stay on the books a lot longer than you anticipate, number one. Number two, the industry data is correct. Most of your clients, if you're an advisor, the next generation, they're probably going to leave. There are things you can do to enhance those relationships and hopefully make it better. One of them is to hire that younger advisor. So I am 50 years old. And so like Michael, I started my career in the 90s cold calling from a bullpen. It's how you got started. And they would run, 100 of us through every 2 years. We would all fail. We would cold call and, basically just end up generating leads for other advisors and wash out. Some would make it, some would stay in the business. That stopped 15 years ago. What that process did at Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley and UBS is it groomed advisors that could then go to other places. And since it's not there, the opportunity and challenge is finding that next generation of advisor. Now, if you think about this, in the 1990s, the kids that were okay with getting on the phone and making 500 cold calls a day to try and build a book of business, that doesn't really fit the MO of this current generation. It's not the way they look at the world. So creating salaried advisor positions for this next generation creates both an opportunity for them and for the senior advisor to have a good handle on what the cost would be to have a new advisor on the team to handle that younger generation. And quite frankly, the lower half of the book of business.
Got another question, a real question as well, by the way. But by the way, to your point, Jay, there was an advisor I was talking to who was at Oppenheimer, and his turnover of his management team under him, there are 3 people. He's the senior guy, 15, 20 years. He's keeping that younger infrastructure, younger group there to keep going, and keep the relationships real. Here's my question though. We're at a point in time where 5% is not hard to get. I mean, treasuries, yield you 5%. What does that do for the role of the financial advisor? Because I've talked to a lot of advisors who are saying this is an opportunity for me to capture new clients. And I've also talked to some financial advisors who are in a little bit of a panic because they're like, people are asking me to simplify my portfolio because I can't promise them much better than a 5% return. And you know what? If I simplify things, it's easier for me too.
Yeah, I'm all for radical simplification of everything. Makes the business easier to manage. The clients understand what they're getting from their advisor. And you're just talking about the investment side here. There's a lot of other things that go into it. And it just makes for a happier quality of life. But specifically around what you can get today in treasuries, it surprised me how many advisors I had to retrain how to build treasury ladders over the past 18 months, because it's been so long. There was a generation that didn't know how to do it. And then that also means there's a generation of clients that don't know the benefits of doing a treasury ladder versus a money market fund. So it does present those opportunities to get new assets inside the door.
I think it does go to the differentiator, the niche, right? Like, I don't work with a financial advisor right now, but I mean, I have a tax attorney, right? And I have accountants. I got more lawyers than I can imagine.
Those aren't investments, by the way, in case you didn't know.
I don't, what's a pitch to get somebody like me to say, yeah, I want a financial advisor? Like I lack an understanding of the pitch to the next generation of wealth.
So are you putting yourself in the tranche of the next generation of wealth? Or are you talking about pitching small business owners?
Well, all my wealth is in this company. So
way to call him out, Jay.
Yeah. No, but
it's really two different value props though.
Yeah, I hear you, but like, how do advisors differentiate themselves today?
It's planning.
Yeah, it's and for you, Michael, it would be tax planning. So a smart advisor researches somebody before they actually present to them. They try and identify what some of their pain points could be, and they're not just showing up with a stock answer. I would think and I haven't done this research, but if I was on you, Michael, clearly tax planning is going to be your biggest issue. And if you're not a tax expert, that is a way that a planner would be able to provide some guidance to you. We're not going to teach you how to build a better portfolio. You already know how to do all that stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I love K1s. Everybody else hates K1s. I love K1s.
Yeah.
Daniel, you want to jump in?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm also going to challenge you on the other side of that and say that the investment can be used to gather assets, right? If there's a very unique story, which we tend to have here at Title, very unique ideas, they can be used to gather assets. So I have an advisor, I won't say what broker dealer they work at, but they were working with a client who was a member of the LGBTQ community, inheriting a large sum of assets, so generational wealth transfer. We have a very specialized product here at Title that focuses on, it's like an ESG plus portfolio. It's a social justice where gender justice is a part of it. It's approved at that broker dealer. The advisor put that in at 15% of the, portfolio allocation that she presented. The client or the prospect called her up immediately and said, "Thank you for taking my values into account. You're the only person that I interviewed that actually listened to me." She won the account. It was 8 million plus.
Excellent. I love that story. So we have a saying at Resilient Advisor, and that is investments are only a commodity to a commoditized advisor. People who are giving out their investment management to some third party to manage, you are becoming commoditized. But if you own the process and you can explain it in a articulate way that they understand, it can be a clear differentiator that most advisors can't do. And Dan, here's my test for it. So if I'm interviewing an advisor, they're thinking about coming through one of my programs, I say, all right, I'm a prospect. I'm just telling you, Dan, I'm going to be a client. what are you going to do with my money? And if you can't answer that sentence, if you can't answer that in 3 to 4 sentences clearly and concisely to get me excited about talking to you, you have to make sure you have that in your arsenal.
Mhm. Agreed.
Can we go, I wanted to go back a little bit to the idea of the social media and the marketing stuff.
You just wanted a drink.
Yes, I'm thirsty. But anyway, so I'm reading this book right now about marketing and sales, trying to learn a little bit. And one of the first things this book says is by Marcus Sheridan, and he talks about how in the current environment, in the digital age, marketing is no longer an expense for any business, including an advisor. It's really a lead generator way before sales, because the stats that they share is like 70% of every buying decision, whether it's an investment product, whether it's a service, is done before the potential customer even talks to the company, even talks to sales. It's all that marketing effort. And social media being a part of that. I mean, how do you get that message out there? So to, our idea of the best practices, what is the, say, 3 things every advisor who's looking to grow needs to do in terms of marketing, other than, I think, actually rethink marketing as not an expense, but actually as a revenue generator? Because I think most companies think of marketing as expense, sales is revenue, when in truth, I mean, the data is showing that marketing is increasingly revenue generator and essential to growth.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So let me share some names and people who have done this very, very successfully that advisors could go look up. So a gentleman named Brad Johnson from Triad Partners is one of the best marketers in this business. He recently did a podcast with Dave Zoller of Streamline Financial. If you are interested in YouTube marketing, this should be the first video that you watch. Dave has built his YouTube channel, which he started during the lockdowns. And today he's getting 40 to 60 qualified leads a month for his team. He was very intentional, methodical how he built his YouTube channel and is targeting folks that would be consuming YouTube. So whether you go, and Dave also has a pretty cool practice management YouTube page as well called Streamline Financial or Streamline My Practice. I would definitely check that out. But if I was going to be an advisor today and start, that would be my core hub of where I'd want to generate content and try to generate leads because of its association with Google. From there, it would depend upon what your niche is. If you're going after dentists, you don't need to waste any time on Twitter or any time on LinkedIn. It seems that Facebook has the ability to target folks in that space, and maybe you want to run some ads. But when you look at Facebook and Instagram, you don't need to become a personality. It's more of a push ad program. If you were targeting reporters in the financial services industry or anybody associated with ETFs, you would want to have your own profile on Twitter because you would be able to connect with folks and engage and grow your brand that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like the advisors that create that large social presence on Twitter tend to be the ones that move from being an advisor to having a product, right? Like Ross Gerber, I can't ever say the other word, but Gerber. It seems like Twitter's more for financial products than it is for financial advice. And it's really hard to get out your value prop of financial planning in 144 characters or whatever. So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And one hack for anybody that's listening, if you don't want to go and watch that whole interview with Brad Johnson and Dave, Dave had a call to action inside of his videos where it was something to the effect of, if you want to find out if you have enough money for retirement, visit whatever the jump URL was. That took you to a Google document where you inputted some key variables that he needed. He then took that data, put it into what was Riskalyze and is now Nitrogen Wealth, and then scheduled a call with that person to have a conversation about whether they have enough money to make it through retirement and talk about an engagement. So adding real value to somebody who is listening and then trying to flesh out some potential leads for his company. It's just excellent marketing.
So Jay, since we're talking about social media, but we haven't talked about Threads yet. What's your vision or take on Threads?
I deleted my account earlier this week. How about you guys?
I mean, I don't want to have to go get it again if they do
I'm
something
not
right.
deleting it.
Yeah, I'm not
I
deleting
haven't
it.
even started mine, so I'm behind it too. I'm fighting it.
I
Why'd you
posted
delete
one
it?
fishing picture there.
Why'd you go to the extreme to delete
I
it?
think he's joking with you, Dan.
Yeah,
Is it?
no,
Oh, I have no sense of
no.
humor.
Yeah.
I did
He's
take
just
it.
saying it. Yeah,
I
he's
took it
just-
off my phone. We're not applying any pressure there.
Yeah. Eric, you want to come up with your question
From the dungeon?
from the? Oh, you can't speak. I got to read it for you. Okay. Well, I wasn't sure what LLMs meant. Yeah, why don't you put that in the chat before I read it? Because I'm outdated on whatever that
Hey,
stands for.
who knows what it might mean? It's coming from Eric.
Well, first I thought it said lead market makers because that's what my brain sees, right? Like my ETF brain. Oh, large language models. I think the H part's on.
You want to talk about AI and lead generation?
That seems to be the question. Yeah.
Excellent. I was hoping we would talk about AI a little bit because advisors are going to be very late to the AI game because financial advisors are late to everything, usually because of compliance and a little complacency. So I have a client who gave me permission to talk about this. His name is David Ortiz. His firm is called The Financial Chef. Brilliant marketing, even before there was social media. He has a van. He's a gourmet chef. He has a van that has labeled Financial Chef, and he drives to client appointments and it cooks them dinner in the van and delivers their financial plan. Great marketing. He's always been on the
I'm in. I'm finally getting a financial advisor. I can't figure out what's for dinner any day. If this guy cooks for me twice a year,
Financial advisor.
I'm gonna have David Ortiz with an asterisk next to his name be my financial. No, you keep going. Sorry.
Well, I have him sold on just using ETFs, so you guys would actually bond together really well.
Awesome.
So he's been playing around and going deep on AI, and he is an independent advisor. He's his own compliance officer because he's boutique, so he can kind of push the edges a little bit. But what he told me is that the real advantage to AI today is it gives you the opportunity as an advisor to be truly present when you're having a conversation with somebody. And here's what it looks like. Whether it's on a Zoom and it's being recorded or in person and being recorded, some of this technology today will record that interaction, create meeting notes, and then because of the way AI works, you can ask these tools what was said in the meeting, extrapolate things that maybe the advisor missed, and then most importantly for compliance, it's all documented inside of their CRM. So, David's doing a lot more with that, he's going to start sharing with the advisor community. In fact, we'll have him on Financial Advisor Television, but he's got some really cutting edge stuff going with that. Tyrone Ross, who I know has been on this show here, him and his partner, Eric Smith, they've been using Notion inside of their practice. And Notion has a lot of AI capabilities that help facilitate the same thing for advisors as it relates to practice management. And then lastly, there's a newer firm out there called Tiffin Wealth. And Tiffin Wealth has gone, they are a serial fintech incubator. They've rolled up a couple of their really cool products. And now they have this AI-powered mechanism at Tiffin Wealth where they can help you build better custom proposals for your clients and better marketing programs based upon all these different variables that the software can analyze to help you run your business. So AI's here and it's coming really fast for advisors who are paying attention.
Isn't there some risk there though, too? Like, I mean, there's always risk with AI, right? We've had a couple of our AI shows. I think the biggest risk with AI is not the tech, it's the people that will use it. I'm much more afraid of us. But like Tiffin, for example, they use that data, right? So all that stuff you put in there, they're trying to sell me on the back end that I can see what advisors are doing. Like, where is the slippery slope with some of these tools?
Well, I'm not sure of the back end with Tiffin. I tell you one that came up this week when it was disclosed that Zoom changed their terms of service so they could take this call right now and go and use it for AI training. And I've been on Zoom for so long. I have very personal conversations with advisors about real life issues. And the idea that they're taking that data and somebody is training on it, I think is a real liability to financial advisors. And I'd love to know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's what Zoom's going to do is make it so there's charged versions where you can't do that, like enterprise versions. But yeah, if you're using the free Zoom, I'm sure there's, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product, right? That's the simplicity. Right. So, I am going to have Tiago look into that, make sure that our enterprise license has that button checked off. But yeah, that data can be scary. Yeah, it's interesting though, because I do think AI can do a lot in our space. Like I personally thought the whole robo advisor craze was way overblown.
Yes.
Like I've been saying for years that financial advice is selling two forms of trust, right? So the first form of trust is that your money is there, right? Like, and that's all the pipes and things that like we do with the title or JP Morgan does with custody or this or that. And I've been a big believer for a long time that a lot of that trust that Wall Street charges for today in that field is going to get disintermediated with more or less blockchain like stuff. Various different iterations, and the price is going to go down. That leaves this other form of trust, which is the trust that you're selling advice. Like, fee pressure in our industry of financial services is talked about constantly. The place where I see it least talked about is for financial advisors. I've never seen somebody hold on to that 1% so freaking hard, right?
Yep.
I've got zero fee ETFs out there. I'm interested. Why do you think that trust component is what allows the advisor community to really have a pretty good stronghold on that 1% under $1 million?
So think about the life cycle of a client. So in this hypothetical example, say an advisor picks up a couple after they turn 50, time to start it's when you really want to start planning for retirement. You spend 10 years helping them make sure that they don't mess up their pre-retirement years. You become friends. You do an excellent job with tax planning. You make sure estate documents are in order. And then you start getting into your 60s and then your mid 60s and 70s, and maybe some of your faculties are slowing down. There's a real trust embedded with the advisor. And I'm talking about good advisors, not the ones that are taking advantage of their clients. Like, nobody ever questions the 1% fee. It's just not even on the table, because what they're getting is that peace of mind of having somebody that's going to be able to work with them through their retirement years.
All right, Dan, I know you want to go, but I want to stay on this fee thing for a second. So one thing that I think is interesting with the 1% fee is that it's great on those big accounts, but essentially the big accounts are subsidizing the work for the little accounts, right? So this 1% fee thing is like the most capitalistic thing you could ever imagine, but it allows advisors to almost be socialist with their book, right? Like, the $3 million account is paying the same quote unquote fee as the $100,000 account, but dollars in the pocket are completely different. Have you seen any innovative fee structures that could be interesting for the future? Because I think the 1%, it's got a long way to go, because like you said, there's a whole generation that's still going to be willing to pay for it. But I find it hard to believe it's going to be here in 50 years.
Yeah.
50
So-
years.
Yeah.
If
I'm giving a high over.
So great ways to get shunned on Twitter are to say hedge funds don't provide value. Market cap ETFs only are going to get you in trouble, and start talking about 1% fees. People get viscerally mad about it. But for my practice, I get the opportunity to see all these different advisors and how they structure their fees. And there are ways out there that advisors are making it less socialistic and making it more valuable for anybody at whatever their asset level is inside the book of business. We could spend 3 hours on this, but some really basic concepts. Number one, tiering the fee schedule. So maybe if you're under $500,000, you're paying 1.25. If you're over 2 million, you're paying 75 basis points. There's lots of ways you can normalize the fee schedule that way. The second, and this is really important for people who are going to be in business 10 years from now, separating financial planning fees from investment management fees, because the investment management fees are going to come down. The real alpha that an advisor adds to a family is really in the planning. You can save more money in tax strategy than you can finding alpha by tweaking a portfolio. But paying for that separately is what the younger generation is doing. And that includes, I mean, millennials are 42, 43 years old right now. So those folks some of them are becoming accustomed to paying, whether it's a flat fee annually or a monthly subscription fee for planning, but separating those two deliverables.
I think the fee issue is so important. And to me, the funny thing is, I find most financial advisors don't want to talk about the fee. And so they undercharge, to tell you the truth. When you think about somebody who may
Not the
start with
chef.
very
The
little-
chef charge is good, man. I'm just kidding.
No, but seriously, I think a lot of folks using the $500,000, dollar amount. So it's $5,000 to be on call and available whenever somebody's got a question, right? And it's always complicated and inconvenient, and you've got to be proactive. You've got to be worried. I don't think it's a lot of money, to tell you the truth, for what you're offering and the relationship that's over decades. So I have no problem with the 1%. And actually, I don't think that financial advisors should have any problem with it. Now, having said that, I love what you're talking about as far as planning is concerned, because that's aligning with the service that you're providing. And at the end of the day, with certainty, if you're a good planner, what does that mean? It means you can say, listen, under these rules, I can deliver this value. And that's far greater tangibility than I'm a great investor, therefore you can invest with me, right? And I think that's aligning product with service, or product with outcome, I guess I should say, or service with outcome. God, I hope we have an editor here.
Do you have a question?
No, I'm just listening. I'm listening to what Jay's saying, and since I'm not a planner, I have no clue on that. No, I don't. Dude, you always do that.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
I would let you run.
I'm gonna like go around the horn, because I got people on our team here that I want to get into this. So first, I'm gonna go back to Daniel. So Daniel's one of the people here who help promote our ETFs, right? So he's mentioning the social justice ETF. He's represents a couple other ETFs here, our SPACs ETF, things like that. So you're talking to hundreds of financial advisors, Jay, right? You're giving advice to them and all that. You have the TV. If Daniel wants to get to one of these people, what should he be doing nowadays? Because like, you can't go to a branch anymore with donuts. Like, that world has ended. What would you say to a Daniel as to how do I get an advisor's attention?
Yeah, I mean, that is the $1 billion question that we're all trying to fight. We help asset managers do that with one component, and that's the video deliverable in areas where they're consuming content. And you guys do a great job of it on the Think Tank too, because I see
We're doing it right now. This is what this is. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And where we're getting the best results for ourselves and clients are in these vertical videos that are concise and highly edited. So it's not just a PM saying, well, our PE ratio, our average PE ratio is this, and our drawdown is that. They don't care about that. They want to hear something that is engaging about the fund. So ideally, that then leads to more mind share. After that, it's the calls to action that you guys are great at here at the Think Tank. Most asset managers, unless they're the mega managers, are awful at. What can you do to get them to go to your website, to click a link and download something? And that right there, I think, is where all the money is made. But most of your competitors, they're not making those vertical videos to get in front of people where they consume content.
No. All right, Daniel, new show we're going to have to create. Cynthia's going to be interviewing you going forward on all the funds. So I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. But
I mean,
all right.
Wholesaling, the sales side of what I do has definitely changed, like in the post-COVID environment. You're not on the road as much, right? You're not on the road 4 times a week. So I think most interactions, which is more appreciated by advisors as well, an initial reach out, either to introduction to me or an introduction to a specific product that they want to learn about, is usually a virtual interaction. And then it kind of, organically happens and you build trips around that and meet in person. But sometimes those old school antics do still work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I used to carry the bag. I mean, donuts in the morning, big lunch presentations, and then steak dinners at night. And it worked back then. It just doesn't work anymore, does it?
I tell you, when Guillermo's the CEO of our company, but both of him and I were partners at Global X. And I remember doing road shows with him where we would walk into a Morgan Stanley branch and we have bought all the sales assistants lunch, and there'd be the 7 advisors that actually showed up, and Guy started every meeting with, who here has heard of Global X? Show of hands. And nobody would raise their hand. And then he'd say, who here has heard of the super dividend ETF? And, oh, I own that. Who's heard of Guru? So it's amazing to me. I started to realize with ETFs, advisors know the ETFs more than they know the companies behind the ETFs, which was very much an epiphany. Like, that's why I believe there's such a value on tickers. And we spend so much time with our clients figuring out tickers. And we've learned very hard. Some of our clients who have not listened to us in the past learned the hard way. You don't want your ticker to be the name of your company, or like they tend to come out with, I want it to be reference something that's important to me or whatever. No, you want that ticker to tell your story in the ticker. Hence block, right? Like block. It's that's it. Done.
Yep.
DeFi, done. Chat, done. Right? Like, all right. Let's see, who else do we want to play here?
Could I add something to that I think is really important? So you're spot on about the ticker. They don't care about the company. What we have found, though, is if there are thought leaders, which is the formal word for talking head, who are comfortable being in the marketplace and building a brand for themselves, their funds grow faster because people, and
you're right. Because when we do an assessment,
doesn't that, at the end of the day, I think we're constantly talking about this reinvention of the advisor space, but what I always think at the end of the day, this is a relationship business. It's all anchored on that trust, and that doesn't change. It's just basic human nature to trust somebody with something that's precious to you. So I think there's an element there that is, we talk about constant change. I think the delivery mechanism is different. I think attention spans maybe are shorter, so we got to get the message faster. But, when it comes to ETFs, I always say every ETF is a story. People connect to stories, and stories, you go out there and you tell the story, and you need somebody who can tell the story, the talking head. And so some of these things I think are just universal, that don't actually really change.
Yeah, I think people think that they're not necessary in their business, right? Like they get lost in it. You want to go, Dan, or you want to?
Yeah, no, I'm going to push. I'm not frozen here. I'm going to push back on something though, because sorry, Jay. I know this is a little bit off subject, but there is this. I was talking to an advisor today, and he runs a $2 billion book, and he's like, well, how do I know these newer products are really going to be there in the future, and that they're structurally sound? And ultimately he felt a lot of comfort in the fact that, well, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, etc., and Invesco, they control 76% of our marketplace, right? That, well, it's maybe this isn't a question, but it's more of a statement, but forgive me, that there's you can't fire IBM kind of thing, right? So I'm going to pose the question to Jay on this. When you're talking about Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, the big firms, and you're an advisor at the wirehouse, is there really an advantage from, well, I'm sorry to put you totally on the spot, from the payout standpoint, that you're getting business as a result of the wirehouse brand? Sorry.
It's all right. I have friends at the wirehouses, some clients at the wirehouses, and I tell them the same thing. If you choose to build your business on the wirehouse platform, it's not a business, you're an employee. If you build your business on an independent platform, you actually own the business. And the difference comes down to how does it present on your balance sheet? If you're sitting at a wirehouse, there's nothing on the balance sheet. The minute you go independent, you have an asset that you can later monetize and a business. But what really comes with that is the freedom of marketing. If you want to grow, if you're not inside of a wirehouse, you guys have all experienced the compliance troubles that are there. Now, there are some advisors that thrive on that. Their pitch is, hey, this is so-and-so. I am with Morgan Stanley, and we want to talk to you about your investment plan. That works for them. But for some folks, they don't need that backing. Did that answer your question in a mealy-mouthed way?
No, it does.
I am way more likely to hire the financial advisor chef guy who's going to make me dinner than somebody at UBS. So, all right, I'm going to go a different angle. What we have found really interesting as of late is the advisor PMs, right? And the reason they're super interesting for us is, let's say they got 400 million and 75 of it's in one strategy. Well, for us, Brittany just raised her hand because I was going to introduce her. Brittany's our head of biz dev. If you're an advisor with 75 million in a strategy, I can make it better. You talk to Brittany, we stick it in an ETF, and now it's tax efficient. I want to find those advisors all day long because most of them don't even know how good it is, right? Like even to this day, most advisors don't know how tax efficient that ETF wrapper is going to be for them. And then, they don't know how powerful it is that they have a ticker associated with them. I mean, we have our mutual friend who was on a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Simpson, right? Like he went from essentially being an advisor to having a multi-billion-dollar ETF. And all he did was move an SMA strategy into an ETF and did a bunch of videos with you and waited. Like it, I wish it was a rinse I like that, but I don't know. Anybody out there listening who's an RAAPM, talk to Brittany. But how does Brittany find them? Help me guide them to Brittany.
Well, I tell you where I think there's an incredible opportunity is for folks that are still leveraging. And I have clients who have SMAs, but advisors who are using SMAs at scale because those SMAs are so expensive still. The fee compression hasn't gotten there. If you could go to them and find those folks that have $150 million in the ClearBridge growth strategy and propose an ETF structure with a manager where you could pull that out, because the reason that advisor, I went through that this week, the reason we can't move directly out of that into ETF models we've built for them is because of taxes, which you guys bring to the table is the way to eliminate all that.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays, if you had that, you could actually, and depending on your custodian, you could actually contribute that in kind and reset the tax basis. It's absolutely amazing what can be done now.
Right. Yeah. So selling that to the advisor, first of all, I only learned about that as an option from Dan about 6 or 8 months ago. So I didn't even realize that was something folks would do. So there's probably an educational component to it as well, getting in the marketplace and making sure these RIAs know that.
Well, Cynthia's written a bunch of papers on it. So we have that out there. And I know our competitor Wes has written some stuff on it. He's done a couple. We did one the other day, HF. It was an SMA that's been run for, I think 8 years. And literally the prospectus was replicating the SMA, and we had to seed it with the SMA. The SMA was run in a large IRA. You know how hard it was to seed an ETF from an IRA? But we did it. I didn't think it was possible. Somehow we got to the right person at Charles Schwab and made it happen. But yeah, it's so it actually gets to keep the track record of the SMA. It's in the prospectus. But those things are hard. Those are the hard things we deal with. All right. Anyone else? I don't know, Joshua, I know you joined late. Do you want to chime in? Joshua runs our advisory group. So
I'm on listen mode right now, guys. I'll listen mode on that one.
Well, maybe we'll end with
Well, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So I wanted to one of the takeaways from all that we talked about today in terms of the best practices and stuff, it sounds like a lot of success hinges on having your own compliance. And so, is compliance a space that we could shake up a little bit and get the shackles off so we can get more done? Isn't that space a little prime for some reinvention?
Oh, yeah. So when we talk to an asset manager about creating videos for them, we try to figure out who the compliance team is, because then we know how heavy the lift's going to be. The more internalized compliance is, the easier it is to get things through. What surprises me is how many of these compliance teams who want to be critical of social media posts don't even understand how social media works. They want to be critical of video. They don't understand how video marketing works. And we are hyper diligent, because the last thing we ever want to do is get an asset manager in trouble for saying something inside a video with the SEC. That's a quick way to get fired. So yes, somebody can make a lot of money if they could build a compliance firm that would help advisors and asset managers in a more streamlined, friendly way.
Eric, you got a question?
Yes, I do. In that vein, is there a threat or actual examples of the SEC's crackdown on social media communications, private social media communications, coming to the financial advisor level, or do you think that will be confined to the portfolio management?
All right, so you were a little muffled, but what I think I heard you ask, are there any examples of advisors struggling with the SEC coming to them with their social media marketing activities? Is that correct? Yeah. So I believe, and I'm not a compliance expert at all, I believe the biggest issue for advisors is talking about performance. And even now, after these new rule changes, showing past performance inside of certain proposals and illustrations. So what we encourage advisors to do, and portfolio managers when they're talking, you just have to stay away from performance, try to stay away from yield if you can, and stick to higher level concepts when talking about a product or service.
Yeah, just don't mention anything that matters.
Yeah, I think so. So social media, that's our drinking word. With product pushers, it's all the 40 Act law stuff, right? People that have it. And so it's like tickers, and it's got to go to a distributor and all that. With financial advisors, I think there's a lot less that gets in the way, unless you start to talk about your investment strategy. Like, I think, Ross Gerber probably has a lot more to be worried about than the David Ortiz.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, will you get the last question?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question, but more a comment. To me, regarding the guy that's the chef, what he's hitting on is he's remarkable, and the worst thing you can be in marketing as an advisor is unremarkable. And when you're at a UBS or Morgan Stanley or something, you have to be managed to the lowest common denominator. They're looking for something that can be broadcast over 20,000 or more advisors, and they've all got to be able to say the same thing. And so you're not really empowered to be able to be yourself. You're not empowered to be able to leverage what actually makes you uniquely different and be those things that allow you to really focus in on a niche and speak to those people that you're most uniquely able to speak to, and I think that with anytime you're doing social media or any type of marketing like this, we're trying to create a brand. You're not going to create a brand by saying we're holistic, because everyone's holistic and we do financial planning, and everybody does financial planning now. You have to be able to be willing to turn some people off. If you are the reason that these strategies work at a place like Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch or things like that is because they're coming from a place of playing defense. When you're already a massive 800-pound gorilla and everyone knows your name, and you're relying on name recognition, you're not trying to differentiate, you're playing defense. So, we talk about compliance. Well, you either got to have your small firm where you're limited and you end up managing your firm, or you've got to work with a firm who's interested in empowering you to tell your unique message. And that's really what our firm does, United Ethos, is we're trying to work with advisors that want to tell their own unique message that doesn't necessarily have to be what every other advisor is talking to, but that requires a culture where people respect different messages and understand is, hey, maybe I'm not really going after the same type of client that you are. So I'm okay with Jay having a very different message that I'm preaching because he's really speaking to a different client, a different niche than I am. I think my question to you would be, just that those bits of differentiating. Are you noticing a certain type of niche that's getting traction, or a certain type of message that's getting traction, or is there something that you're seeing that's really being kind of ignored by the market, that, hey, there's an area that no one's really talking to, where no one's really trying to be the person in this area, that advisors could be that guy or gal?
Yeah. So in reverse order, and I'll do this quickly.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of niches that aren't being attacked, because the financial service industry is full of very smart people who identify trends and go after them. As far as creating that unique story, it's beyond important. I used to do it with an internal program I had, and then I ran across something that's better than what I had. So that's what I use. If you need to define your story, there's a book by Dan. It's called Story Brand.
Yeah, great.
Yes. And I've used StoryBrand on our processes, and then we use it with all our clients. It's a framework for building out your value to the marketplace. I couldn't recommend it more. It fundamentally changed my business after I went through it. And Josh, there was one other in there, but I forgot what it is.
Any areas that you think that are really, there's a vacuum, no one's really trying to entering or trying to talk to a specific type of client or a specific type of message?
Got it. I have not found that. I do find the most common one, which actually was your first one, is small business owners, because they're easy to identify. They generally appreciate advice. So I think if I was starting a business from scratch, I'd probably go after that niche.
Yeah, what I used to deal with is I always wanted the small business owners and the real estate people, because they understood it. And I ran like hell from doctors and lawyers and engineers. Engineers really believe there's like a formula. Right.
Yep.
And the doctors believe there's hot tips, and the lawyers sue you when you go down. Like, they're the three worst clients. So, hey, Cynthia, why don't you wrap us up on that note?
On that note, everybody, stay on social media. It's fun, even if it's not particularly productive all the time. And thank you so much, Jay. Always a pleasure. Everybody check out Resilient Advisor and all the great stuff Jay's up to all the time. And thanks everybody for joining us this week. We will see you next week. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you next week with Mike Green, and we'll
Simplify.
talk investments.
Yeah, back to investments. Well, I don't know. Their investments are a little complicated. So
Bring a
we'll have
drink.
lots to talk about. Yeah. Thank you.
Jay,
Bye.
thanks very much,
Bye.
man.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.